Welcome back to Switch to Linux. So today we're going to do a little bit more complicated of a procedure. We are going to change the Linux partition on a dual booting computer, hopefully maintaining the Windows partition and the Linux partition. So dual booting is not always the greatest of things that you can be doing. And in reality, it's something you kind of do as a last resort. I actually initially dual booted this just to see how well it would work. So what I have here is I have a little netbook computer. This is the Lenovo S21E, and these were like $100 or so, but it was for such a small form system. It actually has a real processor inside versus the other computers in this class actually had the Atom processor, which means that this only has about a 5 to 7 hour battery life instead of the 12-hour battery life, but you actually have processing power. And there is 2 gigabytes of RAM in here. So this computer runs Windows 10 and it runs Ubuntu. And the problem is with running 2 gigs of RAM, Ubuntu takes almost an entire gig. And so I'm going to install Peppermint OS on here, which is where I have on the live key right now. And we're going to use Peppermint OS because it only takes about 400 megabytes of system resources to run the operating system itself. So the first thing we're going to do here is now, and mind you, if I fail at getting the system to work right properly into each of the Windows systems, then I'm just going to wipe the thing and put Peppermint on the whole computer. So what we're going to do is first I'm going to have a quick look at the hard disk. So I'm going to load up gparted. And I'm going to move the camera now so you can kind of see what's going on. Get off the space bar, particularly running gparted. I don't want to accidentally hit something I don't mean to hit. Okay, are we seeing clearly? Okay. So what we have here is we have, here's our device, MMCBLK0P 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. So what we're looking at here is all of the various partitions. Now this one here says Windows 8 OS because I bought this on Windows 8 and I upgraded it to Windows 10. And then we have the system drive, and this is a EFI file system partition. We have, here's our Windows. We have an ext4, which is 11.18 gigabytes. This is actually the Ubuntu portion here. We have a swap partition, which is about 2 gigabytes of space. We have a FAT32 partition, which is 1.3 gigabytes, and this is actually an extra drive that I have in the system, which will allow me to share files between the Linux and the Windows operating systems. We have the NTFS guy here, and I'm pretty sure that this is actually the bootloader for Ubuntu. So the thing is, I have a legacy bootloader option, and I have an EFI bootloader option. Now, I actually initially thought that this NTFS was probably the Windows one because the NTFS is more of a Windows platform, but I have this here, and I know that Ubuntu is running off the legacy, not off of EFI. So I'm not completely sure what's going to happen when I try and do this here. So again, we might get a little bit of system issues. Maybe I will attempt to keep the boot manager going. Or maybe what I might be able to do is actually get in and see all these. I'm not sure that's going to be a possibility. So, ideally though, what we're going to do is we want to load the system on the legacy option for the Linux, and we want to keep the Windows on the EFI portion. Because then I can actually, long term, I can have the computer boot into whichever operating system I want by merely changing it in the BIOS to automatically boot by the UEFI or automatically boot by the legacy option. If I automatically boot by legacy option, it should always go right into Linux. If I boot by the EFI portion, it should always go into Windows. That's kind of the goal. Whether I accomplish that goal, I don't know. Obviously, I did succeed this at one point in time because the computer does work. So now we're going to go ahead and try the install. So we're going to see what happens. I'm going to make a little bit of guesswork here and there, but I think I did not hit that hard enough the first time. Here's a nice classic Pepper 7 background. Looks pretty sweet. Of course, I like the black with the red. Okay, so here we're going to load this guy up. Let me shut this light down. Should help with lighting. Okay, so we are set to English, so I'm going to hit continue. And this might take just a moment to get through this portion here. Okay. So here we are going to install the third party. It's not giving us the option to download updates. A, I don't want to take the extra time, and B, we are not connected to an internet connection. I do want to install all the third party software though, particularly since these computers do have a Broadcom modem and a mouse pad that does not work with a Linux kernel under Linux 4. So, and I cannot remember if Peppermint, yeah, okay, it looks like Peppermint actually does work. So we should be all right. So the next screen is going to look at all of our various options, and we're going to have these options here. So we can install Peppermint 7 alongside Ubuntu, which is not going to be an option for this computer. I do not have room. We can erase Ubuntu and reinstall, or we can erase the disk and install Peppermint. Neither of those options are really something I'd like to do, so I'm going to come down to something else. Okay, so on the advanced installer screen, we are going to have access to all of the various items here. And so again, this one here, this is the one that I was initially thinking is probably the Ubuntu bootloader. We also have this one here, which now I might think could be the bootloader. This guy here is the Ubuntu section. This guy is the part that I want to set to have our install at. So I'm going to come down here, push change, and then whereas use as, I'm going to come up to ext4, and then here I have to select a mount point, and I believe I'm going to select this mount point. I might be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure that's correct. We're going to push OK. All right. So the next thing we need to do is we need to identify where our bootloader is going to go. And let's see. I'm going to see what happens when I just keep it right on this main disk. This might work. If it doesn't, oh well. I come in and then wipe some things out. Now let's see if it gives us an error message or not. It's been a while since I've had to do an advanced install, so I'm pretty sure I might be forgetting something. Let's see. Okay, so it's basically telling us we want to make sure we have all of our data backed up because we're wiping that portion there that we said. So if you can continue at this point here, you are going to, we are going to, let's see, the following partitions are going to be formatted. Partition number 6 as swap. Let's look at partition number 6 as swap. Okay, so that's already the one that's on swap, so I'm perfectly okay if the swap partition gets reformatted as swap. That's no problem. And now we are running through our install. So here, basic install, we're going to start by selecting our time zone, our keyboard layout, US English, US English. So now we have to enter the names, and I'm actually going to move the camera at this point in time because this is actually a production computer. I'm usually doing these on, these guys here on virtual drives and whatever else. So. Okay, so I have everything in here. Now I'm going to require my password to log in or log in automatically. I think I'm going to require my password to log in, which is actually different than how I did have it set up. But I want to do that because this is a computer. This is one of the little computers that I take out with me when I am out and about, and so I'm going to make sure that it is always password protected. Okay, so that part is there. So now we are on to our basic install screen as you see it here. And so at this point in time, now we are removing conflicting operating system files. So that's going to be the Ubuntu portions. And then what we're going to do is walk through all of the various components. So I'm going to pause the video at this point in time, and we are going to come back when we are closer to finished with the install. So it's moving on in the stages of copying files and installing the system. So what I wanted to jump on here and say is that I actually forgot to mention that dual booting. Why is dual booting a little risky? Well, the reason is there is a chance when you are running a dual boot on a computer that an update will mess up the bootloaders. For example, a Windows update might say we're going to fix some bootloaders, and it might wipe out your grub bootloader, or you have a grub bootloader that fails to fix everything in the Windows bootloaders. Sometimes you just don't want to update the bootloaders if they're working right. But in many instances, you don't have the option. Now, by keeping the boot partitions separate on these computers, then I am hopefully maintaining the ability to not have even the boot managers conflicting with each other. However, there is still the chance that that they could. And really, if that happens, then you need to go in and just fix them. In fact, I had an issue where I had a bootloader on a computer. I ran a system update, and the bootloader kind of went goofy on me. And I thought, literally, I thought the hard drive was going bad because it says, non-system disk or system error. I'm like, no, that's not cool. Well, it turns out that it was just fine. It's just that the bootloader got messed up. And all I had to do is go back into the BIOS and tell it, where the bootloader was again. But dual booting can sometimes cause some conflicts, particularly if you're doing a lot of system installs or system updates. Of course, Linux wants to update grub and Windows wants to upgrade the Windows boot manager, and those two pieces of software are generally in conflict with each other. If you do happen to have both systems on your computer, it's probably better to run the grub because grub does play nicely with Windows, whereas the Windows bootloader does not generally play well with Linux. So here you can see some of the software availabilities installed with Peppermint. Let me just flip through your guys here. So here's your Peppermint control panel. Now, another reason I like Peppermint, it's one of the only XFCE desktops that I really like a lot. Just they've themed it out really nicely. I love the theme right out of the box. I'm not a huge fan of the icons, but I can deal with them. So I probably will not change them. But the theming is very nice. If you move windows around, you see you get this transparency, which is just totally sweet. Hopefully I didn't just crash something. Storing previously installed packages. Okay, yeah, okay. Well, I was going to show you the rest of those. But the theming is very nice. There's a lot of system stability here. And if I'm not mistaken, I want to say that Peppermint is actually a build off of Linux Mint. It does run a very similar update manager. Hey, there we are. Uh-oh. Error installing something. Okay, so it looks like I might have to manually reinstall some applications. I think what it was doing is actually taking a list of everything that I had installed on Ubuntu and was trying to reinstall those. And if that is what it was trying to do, I actually had a couple packages on this computer that actually had to be recompiled separately. And if that happens to be the case, that's probably why I'm getting this error message. And the application in question is actually Aptana, is my thought. All right, so now it says installation is complete. I always hit continue testing here because I have found that if you do not hit the continue testing, that it sometimes crashes out on me, like kind of like that. Installer has crashed. So usually if I just exit out of the thing and just shut down the computer manually, it usually works. So we're going to go ahead and shut down. And then we're going to see if I did actually successfully take care of this here. All right. That's a eerie looking look. All right. So we're just going to hit the power button and see what happens. So before I touch this thing, hitting the power button would load the system directly into my my Ubuntu. So if fingers crossed it still works, we should be loading directly into Peppermint now. Hey, starting up Peppermint. Look at that. Well, that's encouraging. Now, if the Windows is messed up at this point in time, I probably don't even care, but we are going to test it. All right, so here's my login. Oh. Forgot what password I put there for a second. Welcome to the first start of the panel. Let's use default config for now. I don't like panels at the top. So we're going to go ahead and do a little bit of panel adjustment here, if I can remember where it is. Can I move? No, I don't want to. This is actually a different install setup than I'm used to. I'm not a big fan of these docks down here, and actually I have to move around a little bit here. Let's remove this thing. Yeah. No, I want to remove the whole thing. So the theming is a little bit different than I forgot how the initial theming went, and because I do not like I don't like panels, and I like my bars at the bottom, and so what I'm doing is can I just get rid of this stupid thing? Yeah, let's quit the panel. See, now I want the top panel. That's exciting. Yeah, it actually maintained all of my documents. That's actually quite hilarious. Now, of course, it's given me the royal runaround here. There we are. I'm just going to have to go back in here and so I'm just going to have to go back in there and theme that off camera, or maybe I'll theme it up a little bit on camera so you can see how I do it. If I do that, maybe I'll see if I can't run a screen recorder on it. This is quite a small computer for a screen recorder, though. So now I'm going to start the computer. I'm going to mash my F12 key, which should hopefully give us the boot menu, and we'll see what my boot menu looks like. Okay, so here we have this hard drive, which should boot up Peppermint, and I have a Windows boot manager here. Let's see if this goes and boots us into Windows. It looks like it's booting into Windows. Look at that. I got my swirly thingy of annoyance. Yay! We have Windows 10. Really? Once again, forgetting my passwords. That's going to be very difficult for me to remember. I got to change those passwords to be about the same. I'm going to go ahead and do that right about now. Change those passwords to be the same. Pardon me. You can look at the wall for a moment. I'll turn around. Look over here. Yay, this is Switch to Linux, man. All right. Okay, so that's good. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to Evil Spy 10 here. I was actually I was absolutely not anticipating the installer to actually save all my files and things. I was literally had backed everything up and put them in other places. So my guess is, let's see, we're going to hit restart on the computer. My guess is that the one program, the error message that it gave us was certainly Aptana, which is probably just fine. After I installed Aptana, I actually started working more with Bluefish, and now I use Bluefish across everything for my web editor. So when it restarts, it should automatically restart right back into Peppermint. It looks like that's what it's doing because I'm not seeing the swirly thingy right after I got this guy booted up. And then hopefully it kept my panel defaults there, and I'll just be able to theme it up a little bit. So here we are starting up Peppermint. So there we were successful. We were very successful in maintaining 2 different Linux installs. 2 different operating system installs. One of those being a Linux based on Peppermint. I forget if this is Peppermint 6 or Peppermint 7. Based on Peppermint 6 or Peppermint 7. Whatever the reason is, 7 I think it is. And I also have Windows 10 on here on this nice little netbook that gets me good, 5-6 hours battery life. And now hopefully it will be, hopefully I will have a lot better system resources. So let me have a look here. System tools. And let's see if I can remember where the information is. Task manager. Okay. Okay, get that panel out of my way. All right. So here you can see this computer right now is only operating on 192 megabytes of resources. So that's why I want to switch it, because Ubuntu was closer to a gig. So we should get a little bit better performance on this particular computer than we got on the other one. Let's open up a folder. Let's see, I don't want to open that folder up. Let's open up this folder maybe. And so here is unable to mount that particular volume. So I'll figure out why that's not mounting later. Obviously the Windows should definitely not be mountable at this point. This guy here should be mountable. I'm not sure why it's not. I'll test that within Windows as well. And if it is not mountable, then I'm just going to reformat it so it will be. So there is my Peppermint install, and I'm going to work on theming it up a little bit more. and then we'll go from there. So this is switched to Linux, and I hope that you enjoyed this presentation.